And now I'd like to ask our featured speaker, James O'Connor, to activate your phone, microphone and video. There you are. Welcome, James.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody.
I'm going to turn it over to you, and just let me know when you need to pass a slide.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Yeah, go ahead, go to the next slide, Doug. So good morning, everybody. So who am I? I am James O'Connor. I've lived in Santa Cruz, raised my family here, moved here in 1996. Worked in Silicon Valley my whole life, spent 11 years at Microsoft as one of the principal developers of Microsoft Office on the Mac, and then did stints at CTO at a couple companies and founded this company right here, Innovation Within. And I would say one thing that last bullet point about me being extremely curious is something that came out of me learning how to do customer discovery, doing customer discovery, and then building a software platform to help other people do it. And I believe curiosity is one of those things that gets pummeled out of you in a lot of education systems because they want you to learn what they want you to learn. But I actually think it's something that's very easy to turn on and get really good at. Next slide. So the problem that Innovation With solves is a problem that is very, very common. 46% of startups fail because there's no market need. And what that means is that somebody had an idea, built a team, raised money, created a product, got it on the market, and then found out that nobody wanted it. And the reason is because they never upfront really understood their customers' needs. May have been a great idea. They may have been really passionate. But in the end, 46% of startups fail because there's no market need, not because they didn't have a team or they ran out of money or all these other reasons that you can fail, but because they actually built something that nobody wants. And I know that that's actually a solvable problem. Next slide. So we were founded in 2015. It's a bit of a story, but the short version of it is Steve Blank as a seed investor and the National Science Foundation gave us a grant to start this, a research grant to build this platform. We're a private S Corp. We build a SaaS platform. It's called the Discovery Platform. We've had over 7,000 users use our system to do customer discovery to validate their business models. And our main customer segments that we're in right now are government agencies like the National Science Foundation, which runs a very big customer discovery program called the I-Corps, the National Institutes of Health, which does a lot of tech transfer and commercialization of IP, and they use this also to vet people before they give them grants. And the DOE, the DOD, NASA, there's lots of government agencies that are starting to realize this can be really helpful to them. We're also very big in universities. We're in over 40 universities across the United States and in other countries like Canada and India and Ukraine and Bahrain and Mexico, because a lot of universities are doing entrepreneurship programs, trying to teach their students how to become entrepreneurs. And one of the best ways to do that is to help them to validate their ideas. And we're also now growing into government research labs like Los Alamos, Princeton Plasma Propulsion Laboratory, that's a mouthful, National Renewable Energy Labs, and that's a growing market segment for us. And we're also used in a couple accelerators and incubators, and we think this is a market segment that's very, it's a good one for us because a lot of startups go into accelerators and don't have product market fit. And then you can see the icons of some of our customers. Next slide. So what I really want to talk about is how you go through this process and what our software does for you. So the big idea is that most entrepreneurs have what you call founder bias. They came up with an idea, they think it's a great idea, they're super passionate about it, and the first thing they want to do is start building an MVP to get feedback, when in fact they may not really understand what the customer's needs are, and building an MVP is already a very biased thing to do in the first place. So this methodology, which is essentially the Lean Startup or the Lean Launchpad, if you've not heard of it, starts by having you construct a set of hypotheses about your business model. In a typical business model canvas has 9 boxes, but we actually have a simpler way to approach this, which is what you see in that screenshot, where you literally just focus on who is the customer, and you state this in hypotheses form. And quite often founders think everybody could be their customer, when in fact, when you build a product, there's going to be a first customer, and you want to think about who that would be, who would be your beachhead market, and state those in segments based on hypotheses form. And then what is the problem you solve? Quite often founders think of what they do in terms of features and benefits and technology, but to the customer, they have a problem, they have a need, and you need to understand that, because if you don't understand that, it's very easy to focus on features and benefits and never really hit a problem that they care about. And the next thing is to find out what's the actual value of that problem, because you could find that this customer segment actually has a problem, but it may not be valuable. They may not spend money on it. They may not do it often enough. It may not be a big enough pain point for you to solve. So by reducing your business model into a set of hypotheses, it puts you into a state where you can now go out and talk to those customers and find out if you are correct about those hypotheses and validate them and invalidate them as you build up this data from customer interviews. Next slide. So let's talk about customer discovery. You probably heard about it. It's called customer discovery. It's called needs gathering. Some people call, jobs to be done. They have customer interviews and design thinking. They all at the core do customer discovery of one form of another. So what you're trying to do, and this is the trickiest part of this whole process, okay, is you're trying to go out and talk to your customers and find out if your solution solves a real problem, but you need to do it in a way where you're actually not telling them about your idea, you're not pitching, and you're not selling. Because as soon as you start with your founder bias, with your excitement and your passion, telling your customer about your great idea, you're going to invoke them being nice to you and being polite to you. And as soon as that happens, they're not really being brutally honest because they don't want to hurt your feelings. And this can lead to false confirmation, where they say something like, oh, your product's great, or I really like that, or I'd buy it, or I'd pay this much for it, when in fact, they're just being nice to you. And that's completely sabotaging the whole purpose of doing customer discovery, which is to get to the truth and to get people to tell you the truth. And the best way to do that is to ask them questions, open-ended questions about their problems without pitching or leading them into your solution. And if they actually start telling you about a problem and it's the one you solve, that's a very clear indication that you're onto something. But quite often what actually does happen in customer discovery is they have adjacent problems that leads you to refine your MVP, refine your business model, refine the feature set based on what they're telling you instead of based on what you think they need. So the best way to do that is to prepare open-ended questions ahead of time and follow a script so that you can actually discover unmet needs and pain points. And when I say follow a script, I mean that loosely in the sense that by having those questions at the ready, you're being somewhat rigorous and consistent in your customer discovery, but it's really important in customer discovery to let that conversation go wherever it needs to. They can go off in the weeds and talk about things that aren't really important. And then as you bring that back over time, you may find that they start, as they're thinking out loud, surfacing insights that really help you to understand problems that they have that could be very valuable if you solve them. So, and I have that bullet point there, don't seek confirmation. And I know that seems counterintuitive, but you are already a founder and you believe you're right. This is a time to set aside your bias and your confidence and actually seek disconfirmation. Is there something I'm missing? Is there something I don't see? And the reason is you're going to find out eventually whether or not you've done the right thing, right? And that is when you give it to them. When you put your product in the hands of a customer, they're going to tell you right away whether they like it or not. And if you haven't talked to them and if you don't understand that, chances are the answer is going to be, I'm not interested in it. And by then it's usually too late. Now you have to, rebuild everything or start all over again. And that's just too late in this process. So you could think of this as a way to de-risk your innovation upfront before you spend a lot of time, money, and energy building the wrong thing. And lastly, if you hear a compliment, when you're talking to someone in customer discovery and they say, wow, that's really cool, I'd really like to see that. It may feel good, but you have failed. And the reason you have failed is because somehow you leaked and you told them about your idea and your product, and now they're giving you feedback. And it's just hard at that point in time to know whether or not just the whole thing is biased and you ask the wrong questions. I will mention that we encourage you to record those customer discovery interviews. Go ahead, Doug, to the next slide. Because in our platform, and that's go back to, yeah, one more. Okay, actually, sorry, next one. We have in our platform the ability for you, when you conduct these interviews, to record them. You can either record them in the platform if you're using the platform at the time of the interview, or you can record it on your phone or Skype call or Zoom like we are right now. And then we can ingest that recording and give you a verbatim transcript that is synchronized with the audio. And that allows you to go back and review. And that's what this slide is all about, because what most entrepreneurs forget to do after they talk to the customers is they hang up from that call and they go, wow, epiphany, I got a lot of great insights. But it's really important to get those down, to write them down. And if you record the customer discovery interview, then in our SaaS platform, you can have a transcript where you can literally listen to what was said and watch what was said in real time and highlight and annotate the key insights that apply to your hypotheses. And in our platform, you can actually link them to your hypotheses. And if you look at the screenshot, what that is this is showing you all the evidence that came from customer discovery that's linked to this customer segment one. And you can see who did it, what the customer said, whether it supports it, whether it doesn't. And then by reviewing that cumulative evidence that comes up over time, you can use that to validate or invalidate your hypotheses. And what this does, it is essentially allowing you to follow a systematic process. It's really the scientific process, evidence-based from a discovery where you take the feedback and apply it to your hypotheses, and then you iterate. So typically in the I-Corps, when they run these programs, they have teams do 100 customer discovery interviews. It's a really high count. And the reason they do that is because they know that if you're really bad at it and you start off and talk to the wrong people and ask the wrong questions, that you'll fail. And eventually you'll start to get traction and talk to the right people and ask better questions. I firmly believe that you can do this with a lot less customer discovery interviews if you are very careful about really thinking through who your customers, who you want to talk to, so that early on in the process, you're talking to the right people. And if you've really thought about the problem, so you're asking the right questions. And if you really do the review, then you will be able to, in this iterative process, to validate your hypotheses really early. And what this typically looks like, just from the 7,000 teams that have gone through my system, is the first 2 weeks, you find out you're wrong. There's a lot of invalidation. The assumptions you made are not really accurate. But as soon as you accept that and invalidate those, you find you come up with better hypotheses. And very quickly, you go through this period where you're kind of just thinking like nobody cares and this doesn't matter, to all of a sudden you start getting some traction and some positive affirmations. Now, you can get just amazing affirmations right out of the beginning where people start saying, I have this problem. And you realize that you haven't told them what you solve, and then all of a sudden you're on your way. Next slide. Next slide, Doug. Is it stuck? Okay. And just in conclusion, I just want to mention that this process works. This is a customer success page on a company called BurnFlex. I found this is one of the most fascinating success stories we ever had, because Mariceli, who you see pictured there, had done customer discovery 2 other times on her own. She had not used our software. She had done it part of other programs in her university. Never really got anywhere from it. She tried to use Google Docs. It was messy. It was difficult. Everything was unorganized. She just didn't have clarity on what was being learned. But then they got in a program with Rutgers University, who uses our software as part of a government program that is done in academia called the I-Corps iSites. And she used our platform, and she was doing customer discovery in multiple countries, in France, in Dominican Republic, and the United States. And she had a product, a very interesting product. It's called BurnFlex. And it's basically an aerosol you spray on a burn, and then a specific material you put on top of that. And she had invented it in high school and was refining it ever since, but just never got to a point where it seemed like she should really do it. And when she started really doing serious customer discovery and used our platform and started recording these conversations and going back and reflecting them, she realized that a market segment was first responders. And when she started talking to them, then she started to realize how important and how unmet the need was in third world countries to have a way to treat burn victims, because they don't have burn units in hospitals. And quite often, if somebody gets burned really, really bad, the first responder can't do much about them. It's very depressing. Some of the interviews were truly amazing because she let me listen in on them. And because her team was able to collaborate on a platform like this across countries, they did really, really well. They validated their business model, and they, were able to get clarity on exactly a lot of details about the product that were vague to them before. And as a result, they won first place in VentureWell's Open Mind Startup Competition. So the benefit of using a system like this and doing rigorous customer discovery really de-risks your startup, your innovation, your intellectual property in a way that you just can't do by building the product or doing some sort of quantitative research, because there is no data on what you're about to build. So that's really the overview of the software platform. At this point in time, I'm more than happy to take any questions if anybody has any questions.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, James. We do have quite a few questions that were submitted before the event, but if you have a question for James, I guess our Q&A is not working currently, so put it in the chat and then we'll be able to get that answered for you. So James, first question, what do we not want to do in successful interviews?
That's a good question. I touched upon it a bit.
Yeah.
But what you don't want to do is you do not want to bias the conversation with your solution. You're looking for unmet needs, and that requires being curious, right? And at the same time, empathetic, so that you're asking open-ended questions. I mean, think of it this way: you know exactly what your product is, right? And ideally, you want to talk to the world about it because you think it's a great thing. This is a case where you don't do that. And in customer discovery, what you're really trying to get to is organically from them just talking about their world, whether or not they have that problem. And it's a little bit tricky because it's very easy to say, do you need this, right? And instead of saying, do you need this, you could ask them a general question about how do you do such and such today, right? And then if they talk about it, tell me about the last time you did it, okay? And was it successful? Did you work with anybody else with it? Did you use any tools? And so you're literally trying to ask super, super open-ended questions. The best customer discovery interviews typically end like this. The person being interviewed says, what are you doing? You ask some really good questions. What is it you exactly build? And it's at that point in time you can say, well, thank you for asking. We're actually working on it right now. Could we schedule a follow-up call where I actually talk about the product and get some feedback from you? And it's way better to do that because you can always get that follow-up call, but it's way better to separate those two conversations so you know that what you're getting from that initial customer discovery call is truly unbiased. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, perfect. And actually that leads perfectly into our next question that Steve asked. How long should I allow on average for customer discovery interviews?
That's a really good question. So I would say a rule of thumb is around, I typically, when I ask someone to do customer discovery, I usually ask for about 15 to 20 minutes, right? But what I have found is quite often, people will let the interview go a lot longer, right? So you should be able to just ask those questions in a short period of time and get to it. But quite often what I find is that people start talking about the problem and they like it, right? I've even had, when I did customer discovery for the platform, I interviewed the chief innovation officer at Intel. And that conversation was 20 minutes long scheduled, and it went for over an hour. And then he asked me if we could do a follow-up call because he had so much to share with me. So what you'll find is when you ask these good questions, human beings generally are interesting and like to talk about what they know. And if that starts happening, let it go as long as possible. And sometimes they'll actually go off in directions that aren't really relevant to what you want to know. But when you bring that back after you let them talk, you'll find that it actually kind of there's a reason they told you that. And there's unmet needs that are connected to that that might help you or be adjacent to you, or even just clarify things that you didn't understand.
Okay, perfect. A follow-up on that question, or I guess maybe a little explanation, is how about not just the actual interview, but how about the entire like discovery process? How long does that usually take?
So there's two answers. One is if you're just doing customer discovery to validate your business model, the shortest that I could imagine you doing this successfully, let's just say that in the NSF, they have you interview 10 people a week. That's very rigorous. That's what they're doing full time. That's 2 people a day. You have to find people, schedule interviews, get on the call, record the call, review it. So interview takes some time. Let's say that you did 5 a week. I would say if you got 30 good interviews, right? And those 30 good interviews gave you a lot of insights that really connected as evidence that supported your customer segments and the problem and the value of it. I think you could do that in a month or 6 weeks. But in fact, I believe that customer discovery should be done continuously. And if you look at all the consultants out there that preach and teach and provide customer discovery consulting services, all of them talk about continuous customer discovery, because the fact is, once you've validated your business model, the next step is to build the MVP. And then during that phase, you always want to be getting feedback, and that's its own form of customer discovery. So as you iterate, what happens is your customer discovery shifts from just validating the unmet needs and getting clarity to now talking to new customer segments, right? That may be the next ones, and also to getting feedback on the actual product itself. It shifts from pure, unbiased customer discovery to, they actually become, in my case, the people I did customer discovery on became the funnel to become my first customers. That's another really, people don't talk about this, but in reality, when you do customer discovery, you end up with customers if you have product market fit. Because what they'll say is, that sounds interesting. Can I learn more about it? Then you show it to them, and pretty soon they say, I would like to be a beta customer. And that's awesome because, as a founder in a small startup, you don't have the marketing and the sales, and you're actually doing it out of the gate before you've even figured out what you're going to build.
So if that is like the final destination or where you want to reach as an actual customer, how do you start at the very beginning of finding the actual person to interview? Like how do you find those people?
It really depends on your customer segments. I'll give you some examples. We did some consulting with a company, and they had a product that they thought was going to help automate stocking the shelves in grocery stores. So imagine a robot that's kind of like a pallet jack that's automated, and it would drive to the right place in the store, and you would just pick the stuff off and put it on it. And they'd worked on this for 5 years. It was fascinating how it worked. And so the first thing they did is they actually just found the guys who stocked the shelves, right, at the store. And we called them up and we said, can we meet you during your coffee break? And they would literally meet these guys. They would come out of the store and they would stand there and they would interview them right then on the street. So that's one example of how you find them. Maybe if you're selling, your product is going to be something that's sold, like one of the use cases is it's a new pillow. Stand out in front of a mattress store and talk to people that come in. But it could be that if you're an enterprise business to business, SaaS platform like we are, you're going to talk to those people and you're going to find them on LinkedIn. And what I found is that you have to understand that customer segment and then go where they are. In the case of me finding people in LinkedIn, what I do is I just connect with somebody on LinkedIn and say, we're doing research in your area. You have expertise. We would love to talk to you. Can I have 15 minutes of your time? If you ask people that way, where it's like we're doing research and you have expertise, you're valuing them, you're not asking for a lot of time, you'll find that people are generally, we live in a pay it forward society, so it's not that hard to find them. And again, when you get that person on the call, make sure you've really in our system, we have templates that you can create for those questions so that you're asking the right questions right out of the gate.
Okay, next question. How long does it take to get familiar with your software to the point of where you can actually start the process of doing these interviews?
Great question. Actually, that's something we've worked really hard on. So my background is I started working in software before Mac, before the graphical user interface. And I am fascinated and I love building software that's super easy to use. And even though conceptually it's, it seemed like it's complicated what we do here, our platform is drop dead simple. You click, type in your hypotheses, you link them to your customer segments by selecting something in a menu. You import the audio file. You can literally select any text, type your comments, link it. It's very, very fast. And part of the reason it's fast is because we've been using it with 7,000 clients who are mostly, a lot of them are students who take it in a class and they need to get up to speed right away. And also we do a lot of onboarding and training sessions, and I get feedback, and we actually watch how people use the system. And we've gotten to the point where people figure it out really quickly. So if you want a demo, just go to our website and click get a demo, and I'll show you how fast it is to use the system.
Great. Okay. Here's an interesting question. This is from Michael. How to tell if you are answering the question on what they think you want to hear? So I guess basically, how can you tell if they're actually just telling you what you want to hear, or are they, how do you do that?
Yeah, don't ask them questions about what you want to hear. That's the really tricky, that is the hardest part. I mean, here's a really great resource. Okay, I'm just going to show you this book. It's called The Mom Test. And if you look at the subtitle, and it's what I like about this book is, look at it, you can read it in an hour, right? Or 2 hours. And it says how to talk to customers and learn if your business is a good idea when everybody's lying to you. And the key to this is to ask them questions, not about your idea, but about them, right? And they don't know what you want to hear if you're asking just generic questions about their problems and, the unmet needs they have. But it's a bit tricky. And this book is really, really great. You'll know when they start saying things that, when you start getting a compliment, that's the perfect one. You should deflect all compliments. When somebody says, wow, it sounds like you're working on something really cool. Well, clearly you told them something that made them think about something, clearly it's you projected what your solution is. And you're going to make mistakes. I do it all the time, but at least you can hear it in your recording if you go back and do that. And that's another thing we've learned is that when you first do customer discovery, you're bad at it. I was horrible at it, right? And that's okay. And you get better really quick, especially if you record those calls and you listen to yourself, because you actually get to reflect and see, did I interrupt, right? Did I not ask a good follow-up question? Wow, they just told me some nugget and I just asked my next question and just kind of steamroll it over them. And, I liken it too. If you think you sing well, right? Because you sing in the shower and it sounds good to you, record it, play it back, right? And you'll hear if you're flat or sharp or if you don't have good tone. And in the same way, if you record your customer discovery interviews, not only are you going to get these nuggets from what they said, but you're actually going to see how you do. And it's a lot easier to adjust when you're listening to yourself than having someone else give you feedback and say, hey, James, you did this, you did that, because you might get defensive. So.
Okay, so we got one more question here. Oh, it seems like another one came in. This is also from Steve. Does your platform, add objectivity to be able to score individual concepts to compare them against each other to help decide what to do, and 2, track your project, kind of like a project management tool?
Those are good questions. Our platform, it doesn't add objectivity. You have to be objective. And you have the data, and you have, it's your responsibility in our platform to review what was said and to be objective. The best way I found to amplify objectivity is to do it as a team. And that way your interviews are being reviewed by your co-founder or someone else in the company. And that's keeping you honest. In the qualitative research field, they have this term that's called triangulation. And what they do is they have 3 different researchers look at the same data and come up with their own findings. And if they overlap, that's a clear indicator. So that's one way to create objectivity to help you decide what to do. And to track the project, it's not really a project management tool. It's a customer discovery tool, but we keep a complete history of the entire evolution of your business model. We actually have a slider where you can slide and go back from the beginning of time and go forward, and you can see every change and see how it evolved. And that turns out to be really helpful for people. So in that way, yes, we do track that. And then every interview is logged in the system with the interview notes, the transcript, and then all of the insights, which are literally annotations. And then you can look at all those annotations in a separate view. So you can actually see every insight from every interview, from every team member, all in one place. But yeah, it's not a project management tool per se.
Okay, great. Well, I think that is it. There's actually a couple of questions about how to engage with you and how to get involved with you, but I think Doug is going to take us through that process. So thank you very much, James, for answering our questions.
You're welcome. Thank you, guys.
And Doug, it's back to you.
Well, great. Thank you so much, James. This has been very informative. Here's James's contact information for those of you who want to reach out to him. You can get a demo from him. You can talk to him about pricing if you're interested in using his tools here and getting some consultation. So I don't know, James, anything you want to add to this?
No, other than try it. Go out and do some customer discovery. And I think you'll be blown away at what it does to help you understand. It helped our company build the product in a way where very early on, we got traction from our users because it did what they needed. And all along the way, you find out what the next thing is. And I actually adhered to a policy. I would have all sorts of great ideas, and I would not put them in the product until a customer asked for them. And I will say that actually saved the company. And there was a backlog of things that we've never done because nobody asked for them. And there's been other things that people have asked for that as soon as we put it in the system, boom, you could see the adoption just took off. So it's really a way to turn on the high beams and see further down the road so that you really know and understand your customers. It's incredibly invaluable. I think this process is underutilized today. And I think people who do it have a huge advantage over people that don't.